task is called expert. About the expertise of Krishna, there is a statement in the 10th canto, 59th chapter, verse 17 of Srimad Bhagavatam, wherein Shukadeva Goswami tells Maharaj Parikshit, O best of the Kurus, Sri Krishna cut to pieces all the different weapons used by different fighters. Formerly, fighting was done by releasing different kinds of arrows. One party would release a certain arrow, and the other party had to defeat it by counteracting it with another arrow. For example, one party might release an arrow which could cause water to pour from the sky, and to counteract this, the opposing party would have to release an arrow which could immediately turn the water into clouds. So from this statement, it appears that Krishna was very expert in counteracting the enemy's arrows. Similarly, at the Rasa dance, each and every gopi requested that Krishna individually become her partner. And Krishna immediately expanded himself into so many Krishnas in order to be coupled with each and every gopi. The result was that each gopi found Krishna by her side. So the next one is grateful. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 14, entitled Ideal Family Life. And this is text 25. Eshu Swanam Japo Homo. Eshu Snanam Japo Homo. Vratam Deva Dvija Charanam. Vratam Deva Dvija Charanam. Pitri Deva ne Bhutebhyo. Pitri Deva ne Bhutebhyo. Yad Datam Tad Di Anavashvaram. Yad Datam Tad Yanasvaram. Eshu Snanam Japo Homo. Ratam Deva Dvijachanam. Pitri Deva Nebhutebhyo. Yadatam Tadyanashvaram. Eshu Snanam Japo Homo. Vratam Deva Dvijachana. Pitri Deva Nebhutebhyo. Yadatam Tad Anasvaram. Eshu Snanam Japo Homo. Andeva Dvijachanam. Pitrideva Nebhutebhyo. Yadatam Tadanashvaram. Eshu Snanam Japo Homo. Pratam Deva Dvijachanam. Pitrideva Nebhutebhyo. Yadatam Tadanashvaram. Eshu, in all of these seasonal times, Snanam, bathing in the Ganges, Yamuna, or other sacred places. Japa, chanting. Homa, performing fire sacrifices. Vratam, executing vows. Deva, the Supreme Lord. Dvija Archanam, worshipping the Brahmins or Vaishnavas. Pitri, unto the forefathers. Deva, demigods. Ne, human beings in general. Bhutebhya, and all other living entities. Yat, whatever. Tatam, offered. Tat, that. He, indeed. Anashvaram, permanently beneficial. Translation. I'll have to read the next one. During these periods of seasonal change, if one bathes in the Ganges, in the Jamuna, or in another sacred place, if one chants, offers fire sacrifices, or executes vows, or if one worships the Supreme Lord, the Brahmins, the forefathers, the demigods, and the living entities in general, whatever he gives in charity yields a permanently beneficial result. So I'll just run through the next one. Samskara kala jaya yaya apatyaj yatmanas tata preta samsta mritahascha kamanya bu yudaye nipa. Translation. O King Yudhisthira, at the time prescribed for reformatory ritualistic ceremonies for one's self, one's wife, or one's children, or during funeral ceremonies and annual death ceremonies, one must perform the auspicious ceremonies mentioned above in order to flourish in fruitive activities. Put by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Vedas recommend many ritualistic ceremonies to be performed with one's wife, on the birthdays of one's children, or during funeral ceremonies, and there are also personal reformatory methods like initiation. These must be observed according to time and circumstances, and in the directions of the Shastra. Bhagavad Gita strongly recommends Gyatva Shastra Vidan Oktam. Everything must be formed as indicated in the Shastras. For Kali Yuga, the Shastras enjoin the Sankirtan Yogya be performed always. Kirtaniya Sadahari. All the ritualistic ceremonies recommended in the Shastras must be preceded and followed by Sankirtan. This is the recommendation of Srila Jiva Goswami. Omagana Tamaranda Shagan Anjana Chalakaya Chakshun Mritam Jena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Malopastam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasali Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchikalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhyevacha, Paditanam Bhavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha. Earlier as well, very technical. And then Srila Prabhupada very kindly recommends in Kali Yuga those who've got sufficient brain intelligence or grasp of the essence of all the different niyama agraha. Either too eager or not eager enough. What's the balance? And how do we sanction everything? So ultimately, whatever leads us to chanting and Kirtaniya Sadahari, that we chant constantly. So one easy way to improve our chanting is just to increase our chanting. So we chant 16 rounds on the beads, and then we try to chant as many rounds off the beads. And if you keep a clicker with you, you'll be amazed how many rounds you can chant when your hands are not on your beads, just walking around or doing things. You can do rounds, and every extra round makes your next 16 that much easier. And then eventually get to the point where you pick up your bead bag, and the Maha Mantra is already so pleased that the Krishna music starts to dance on your tongue. So that's Kirtaniya Sadahari. One should chant the holy name. See, Lord Chaitanya doesn't say one should chant the holy name for only 2 hours a day, and if I catch you chanting any more than that, you'll be in big trouble. He says Kirtaniya Sadahari, always chanting, always. Then it means you're listening to the mind, and then there'll be problems. And then all the different rules and regulations, they come into play if you're not going to take shelter of the Sankirtan Yajna. There's so many discrepancies that can be there. Are you facing the right direction? Have you offered your oblations to your forefathers? Did you fast on this day? All the different rules and regulations. So by taking shelter of that injunction that in this age, Sankirtana Priya Yajna, the yogya for this age is the chanting of the holy name, then everything else is covered automatically. Because we have so many, the Bhagavatam, it gives us so many different prayers and instructions given by different incarnations of Krishna at particular times. And what is most relevant is the instructions that have been given by the most recent avatar. And Lord Chaitanya made it very, very simple. He just left us 8 verses, the Shikshashtakam. Cheto Dalpanamajana, Abhamahanam Shaita Devachankata Vitananam Sankirtanam. There will be all victory if we just do this Sankirtan Yogya. And the holy name, the Shikshashtakam is all about chanting the holy name. First, it's glorification of the wonderful benedictions of the holy name. Second is the detrimental effects of offending the holy name. Third is coming to the stage of Nishta and being free of pride. And then Nadanam, then becoming free from all material desires. And then Ainanda, the stage of Asakti, where we start to feel attachment to Krishna. Please pick me up, place me as an atom at your lotus feet. Nainam Gladashru. And then we start to feel the separation from Krishna. Yugaitam Nimishena. Every moment seems like 12 years. And then Ashna Shava Padavatam. Then we come to the point where we surrender everything. So this is all done through the chanting process. So how much advancement we're making, how advanced we are, is determined by how well we can become absorbed in the holy name. Even though we may have PhDs and HDCs and GBCs and Bhakti Shastris and Bhakti Vaibhavas, everything really. Vijivada Jivanamanandam, Vijivada Jivanaman, Vijivadu, Vijaya. The wife and the life of all knowledge is the chanting of the holy name. So that is the real fruit of all the knowledge that we've acquired. Any questions or comments?
Can it be possible that someone has a lot of taste in chanting, but someone has a lot of taste, like big taste in chanting, but doesn't know anything about Krishna consciousness, hasn't has any theoretical, knowledge about Shastra?
What was that? Is it possible to get a taste in chanting without knowing it?
Well, someone who has taste in chanting doesn't know anything about Shastra or the process.
Somebody who has a taste for chanting, is it possible that somebody can have a taste for chanting or a taste for tanting without knowing anything about anything, without having any knowledge? Okay. So could you give an example? Yeah. 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 Okay, yeah. So if somebody, because somebody doesn't know anything, the more that you know, then the more that you can make offenses. It's like when you don't know anything, then you're not held responsible. So that's namabas when you're chanting. Like when we used to go down to the barras and all the butchers, would be there with their meat cleavers going, Garanga! So they were getting the full benefit. It wasn't that they used to be vegetarian and now they've decided they're going to start selling meat because it's a good way to make money. But we'll chant Gauranga so we can get free from the offense of all the slaughtering of the animals. That would be Nam Aparad. So if we were to do that, if we decided, wow, those butchers look like they're getting a real taste, I think I'll leave the ashram and start chopping meat with them and get my own meat cleaver. And then I'll be able to really get a taste. Gauranga. But because you have knowledge and you know that this is the wrong thing to do, then that would be Nam Aparad, committing sinful activity on the strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. But if somebody doesn't know that and they take to the chanting, then immediately they will get a taste. They'll experience the relief of suffering, the dawning of auspiciousness, and they'll experience some halo of perfection in the chanting. So that's why in the initial stages of Krishna consciousness, when we're very innocent, reluctance to follow a schedule, reluctance to be clean, reluctance to be organized. These unwanted things start to come up in the heart at the same time, preventing them from experiencing the Lord. Okay, to really push through all this, I need to commit. I need to become a sadhaka, bhajana kriya, and then the process of anatana vritti can take place. And then nishta, majjhima adhikari, then we can really preach. So we engage. The Sankirtan Yajna is to go and give people the holy name. And it's important that we don't become diverted. I've just been reading When Good Fortune Arises. And in Australia, in the early 90s, they'd had some problems with the leadership. And so they decided that they were going to focus on just selling CDs and not dressing as devotees. And they were making a lot of money, so the yatra was really starting to build up. And the leaders were worried. Because when you interact with a person who has no knowledge, it takes a certain amount of time to do that. But then the challenge is, can you properly assess which persons are worth spending time with and which persons are better to just, because it's not generally going to be good for them or for you. So many people going past. So the Majjhima Adhikari, he can see the devotee, the non-devotee, the envious, and the Supreme Lord. That's the Majjhima Adhikari. So the Majjhima Adhikari, you put him on the street to do Sankirtan, and he'll look over the heads of everybody and go over to this person and say, would you like a book? And the person will say, would I like a book? I've been trying to get hold of one of these Bhagavad Gitas for 10 years. Can I give you £1,000 for it? Is that enough? Have you got any beads? I want to start chanting, So the Majjhima Adhikari, he's able to identify and connect very, very deeply. So for him, Sankirtan is a different experience than just bashing away everyone that comes, and people wasting your time. But that is the art of learning how to do Sankirtan, that we become very pure in our consciousness. And then when we do meet the right person, Krishna speaks through us, and we say to them, "Oh, you should read this book. It'll stop you committing suicide." And we've never said that before. And we suddenly decide we need to say that. And then the person turns up next week and says, "Thanks for giving me that book. I was just on the way to the train station to throw myself under the next train." You know. So we become inspired to just say the right thing. So that's an amazing experience on book distribution, that you feel yourself being spoken through by the Lord. You become the Lord's mouthpiece, and you say the right thing to the right person at the right time. And so the person, because a person doesn't know very much, then he can't really make any offenses. So that's when the taste is very strong, the first initial stage of coming in contact. And that's why Lord Chaitanya says in the first Shastakam, Param Vijayate Chaitadapanavajanam, everything's Haribol, it's fantastic, you know, the auspiciousness is there, and I can feel good fortune arising, all my problems are diminishing, my bad habits are going away, I'm feeling really happy, I'm feeling really positive now about death, I'm in a good place. And then the next, so that's the initial stage for most people, Chaitadapanavajanam. They may never go any further than that, seeing Rath Yatra, being in the kirtan on Buchanan Street and dancing along and experiencing it. They never forget that for the rest of their life, but that's as far as they go, you know. So that's called Mahapunya. They've secured a human form. And in the initial stages of spreading Krishna consciousness, we want to increase the amount of Mahapunya, because it means the preaching field will become very rich. It means these generations of people that are coming in contact now, they'll take birth as humans, they'll have had some experience of Krishna consciousness from a past life, and now they'll be ready to take to it. And that next stage is when they seriously commit. They become serious, committed sadhakas. So that stage is called Swasti Ayana. Swasti is auspicious, and Ayana is they start a journey. Swasti Ayana. I can find the verse, it's in the third canto. Kartik Chandra gave class from it, not last year, but the year before. So Swasti Ayana. So we are now Swasti Ayana. But of the Swasti Ayana, only a percentage of them will be Shabam, which are the ones that go back to Goloka. But that percentage of persons who are en route to Goloka, that will increase. Now it's a very small percentage of the society. Even in a devotee society, it's a small percentage. But that percentage increases as generation after generation, yeah. So, for these people that experience their initial taste, their initial ecstasy, they get the Mahapunya that they're going to take birth now as a human being in the next life. Whereas if Lord Chaitanya hadn't have come, if Srila Prabhupada hadn't have come, if all the previous acharyas hadn't have come, then there wouldn't be much Mahapunya going on, you know. Practically everybody would be taking birth as an animal in the next life. I think if it came back as a human, they'd be doing really well, because all these different rules and regulations for ideal family life are completely neglected. So there'll be so much pap, so much sinful activity involved. Yeah, so when a person takes up Krishna consciousness and they feel very blissful, and that's just the beginning now. They're just starting out in the evolution of the human form of life. Any other questions or comments?
Hare Krishna, bro. Oh, you read in could counteract water arrows with creating clouds and all. And in society, we hear people kind of take it as some sort of mythology or myth associated around it. And the impression in society is we have advanced so much with technology, warfare skills and all. So how to kind of back up or help someone understand that the Shastras are speaking the true only, it's not myth. This what is mentioned is true.
Yeah, before we can convince other people. We have to be convinced ourselves. And there's Raja Vidya Rajay Guyam Pavitram Itam Uttamam Prayaksagavamam Dhamyam, because it gives direct perception is the perfection. Direct perception of the self by realization. It is the perfection of religion. So generally science and religion are kept in two separate categories. But actually, religion isn't a question of just believing something, but it's a scientific process of becoming aware of spiritual phenomena, pratyaksha. But in order to see the spiritual phenomena, it takes qualification. So in a normal experiment, it says take a test tube, take a Bunsen burner, take potassium sorbate, apply heat, and it will bubble 10 pebble, and a big flame will come flying out the test tube. So, and that experiment just takes a little, just a few minutes to do. So in a spiritual experiment, you take a candidate, he has to achieve a humble state of mind, he has to practice sadhana bhakti and these principles for a certain period of time, and then he will perceive pratyaksha, he will directly perceive spiritual phenomena. So if somebody just demands, no, I want to see it now, I want to see it now, and he's not prepared to undergo the training and the study required, then he'll be disqualified from being able to perceive that direct perception. In terms of myth, if we go back 100 years and we said to people, I'm going to be carrying a little piece of plastic in my hand, and when I poke it, I'll be able to speak to somebody on the other side of the world, then they would have said that was a myth also. So a person's ability to conceive of something is not necessarily a determining factor in what is the truth. So, of course, the candidate has to also be eligible. If a person is too challenging and too mundane in his consciousness. One time Srila Prabhupada was talking to a crowd in Amsterdam, and then he said, stop the lecture, just have kirtan and give them prasadam, because they were so beaten down by the material energy that they didn't have the ability to appreciate. For ourselves also, we had a rule when we were on the Bhakti program that nobody was allowed to read the fifth canto. So of course one of the Bhaktas had to go and read the fifth canto, and then he left the next day. He was reading all about the hellish planets. It was all just too much for him. Oh no, I can't believe this. So some people have the idea that if I believe it, it's real. And if I don't like something, then I just won't believe it, and then it won't be real. So what you believe or what you don't believe doesn't affect what reality actually is. And yet, how to become convinced ourselves? We may have some faith in Srila Prabhupada, but we may not have full faith in Srila Prabhupada. And because we don't have full faith in Srila Prabhupada, then for that reason, we don't take full shelter of his society. Just like I'm reading now, one of my friends was a devotee, and he saw some problems in ISKCON. So he took shelter of Guru Govinda Maharaj, but he left ISKCON. And we had a very bad run-in, actually, which I'll pay my obeisances when I see him, but this was a few years ago now, but it was a very bad run-in. And he was talking Guru Tattva, and he was talking about this and that. And I said, when you're talking Guru Tattva, your Guru Maharaj said that the reason why he left his body is because he was so disappointed with his disciples, because they weren't staying in ISKCON. And he was like, oh, you shouldn't have said that, that's really heavy, But that's what he said. And he was asked many times about taking shelter of Prabhupada. He said, if you want to take shelter of Prabhupada, stay in ISKCON. So we will see, and I have seen over the many, many years that I've been a devotee, that people come into the building of ISKCON and they eat the prasadam and they take advantage of the facilities, but they skim over the significance of Srila Prabhupada and taking shelter of his society. And there are a variety of temptations that can be there, some offering more kind of a rasika approach, some offering what would seem an easier and faster path, And so we stray off the beaten path of being a Prabhupada Nuga and find ourselves in another camp. Of course, in the broad sense, there will be a whole spectrum of devotees and Vaishnavas and conditioned souls, all the different levels of faith. And so we have to be sensitive to that one where Shishikonitai Mai Pashashiki, that when we're presenting Krishna consciousness, it should be in such a way that it's plausible and that the people feel that we have our feet on the ground and that we're practical, pragmatic people at the same time. And just like a doctor has to be sensitive that he can see this person needs this type of medicine, but if he pulls the needle out, the person will become very afraid. So he just gives him a sugar lump, and then over a period of time, he can give him the stronger medicine. So that's the expertise of a Majjhima Adhikari, a preacher, certainly an Uttama Adhikari, who comes down onto the Majjhima Adhikari platform, is that he's able to assess the person's level of faith and then from that decide what truth to administer. The full truth, the partial truth, like that to some degree. So based upon, and it's interesting, and Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani, we're going through that right now, and Shiv Maharaj is addressing the two camps which are antagonistic to ISKCON to some degree or another. One is the Gaudiya Mat, and the other is the Ritvik. So the Ritvik, they don't believe in Acharya, apart from Prabhupada, so they have a GBC. Everything is GBC with Ritvik. They come together, they decide who's going to initiate, who's getting initiated, all done through a GBC. And then the main problem with the Gaudiya Mat was that they rejected Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's request to form a GBC, which Srila Prabhupada immediately did. And they just have Acharya. So they all have their mats all along the Jalangi, you'll see them. And they all do their little bit of preaching and a little bit of this and that. And if they were to all get together, then you would have a Vedic planetarium. But you don't, you just have all these mats. And they have their acharyas. And that's how they succeed the previous acharya with another acharya. So Srila Prabhupada combined the two, GBC and acharya. Then you have a safety mechanism there. And the fact that we have had difficulties with some of the gurus, but the society itself has continued on, is also, in one sense, a strength that even if a particular person is fallible or not fully mature right now to be in that position of guruship, then the society itself will continue and that person will be disempowered or unauthorized to initiate. And he won't be welcome in temples in that capacity until he regains the authorization to do that and the empowerment to do that. So as the society matures, we'll see that system that Prabhupada set up is actually infallible. One person may go wrong, but not a bunch of people. And if a bunch of people, to some degree, then they're a work in progress, and over a period of time, then they'll come to the conclusions. And we have to be patient with that when it's a work in progress. So yeah, and in the Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani, Shri Maharaj talks about the most valuable commodity that a devotee has to very, very carefully guard, and that's his faith in Srila Prabhupada. Anyone that is at odds with the way Prabhupada did things, why did Prabhupada do it like that? Why isn't the Singadev on the altar? Why did Prabhupada not speak so much about Rasa Leela? Why didn't he tell everyone about Manjari Bhav? Why didn't he tell them he was a Manjari? All these different, in this way people are at odds with Srila Prabhupada's mandates. So we want to guard against those types of people. They can do their spiritual life, but we want to keep them distant from us. We don't want to in any way jeopardize our faith in Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada came from Goloka, Vrindavan Dham, with this mission. And everything he did was perfect and complete. We may not realize that in our incomplete and imperfect consciousness. So if we can initially have that faith, then we can become more convinced. And when we become more convinced, then when we repeat that truth to others, experience on Sankirtan, that you can be on Sankirtan and you can be finding it very difficult to get through to people, and there can be another Sankirtan devotee there who's like we went out with Vaisheshika Prabhu, and he was going up to people and saying, California, where are you from? And immediately the people were just like melted, and they immediately trusted this person, felt like he was their well-wisher, and wanted to listen to what he had to say. And you could see that by Sheshaguru, he wasn't an anxiety about getting a score and looking good in front of everybody. He genuinely just wanted to share his Krishna consciousness with other people, make that heart-to-heart connection. And then the transference of knowledge can take place. And as we become more developed in our taste for the holy name, then when we say to people, you should chant Hare Krishna, it will solve all your problems, that will have more effect when we've experienced it for ourselves. Like the Brahmin who was asked to tell the child not to eat sweets. And he said, okay, bring the kid back next week. And then he said, don't eat sweets. Because then he hadn't eaten sweets for a week. So then he could say it had potency. So if you stop people on Sankirtan, you say, excuse me, read this book and chant Hare Krishna, and you'll experience the highest bliss. Like Chaitanya Vallabha, if you've been following the Sankirtan podcasts, so there was one girl that came along and she didn't know anything about Krishna consciousness at all, and she was really fired up to go out and do book distribution. So she went out and she did really well. And all she was saying was, these books have been written by an old man. He was an old Indian man. He almost died on the way across, and he just wanted to give this knowledge to other people. There was nothing in it for himself, and eventually he died, and he was still translating the books. You should read this book. It's amazing. He's amazing. People will go, okay, I'll take that book. Because she was just so enthusiastic, so faithful. So if we try to convince people, well, I can tell you what the molecular structure is of a cloud that's been created by a weapon that was used as a projectile in this way. It's like, that's not how we're going to convince people through mundane knowledge and, and being a PhD or something really clever, and you can remember loads of things. That's not how we're going to convince people. We'll convince people by having faith and taste for spiritual life ourselves, and then people will be fascinated, they'll be intrigued. What's making this person tick, What is it that's enthusing him so much? That's how we can convince people. And the more we read the books, my personal experience that when I read the books, when I'm reading Bhagavad Gita, I feel like I'm at Kurukshetra to some degree. When I'm reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, I feel like I'm in Jagannath Puri to some degree. When I'm reading Krishna's pastimes, I feel like I'm in Vrindavan. So we start to experience that. So Srila Prabhupada said the highest principle is to save yourself. So before you worry too much about convincing somebody, because the problem with trying to convince somebody is, if you're not convinced yourself and you can't convince somebody else, then you may become convinced that it is a myth. So rather than trying to convince people too much, just say, okay, well, yeah, I also felt the same way, but now I'm experiencing something else, And we will only be really fully convinced when we directly have the darshan of Radha and Krishna, when they reveal themselves, Chita Prangana, in the courtyard of the heart. When we go there in that sacred space, then we'll be convinced. And sometimes you're reading books. I'm reading Satchidananda Swami. He'll say things about the holy name, and I haven't heard that anywhere else before. And I'm thinking, he's experienced this. Same Shiv Ramaraj in his books. He'll say things, and you're thinking, I haven't heard that before, but it sounds like he's experienced this. So Satchidananda Swami, he was on an operating table, and they were doing an operation on his stomach, and he'd been given a drug to paralyze him. He'd also been given an anesthetic. And unfortunately, what happened was the anesthetic wore off, but the paralysis didn't wear off. So he woke up on the operating table, and all his stomach was out, but he couldn't move, he couldn't tell anybody. So he was trying to get someone's attention, and as he was trying to get their attention, he fell off the table onto the floor. And he thought, okay, I'm finished now. All his insides are all over the floor, and he's just lying there. He thinks, okay, I'm finished now, you know. And then suddenly Shyamasundar appeared right before him, and he was smiling. And he started getting on Shyamasundara's case. He says, why are you smiling? I'm in such a mess here, you know. And then he asked him, what is it I'm supposed to learn from all this? And then Shyamasundar brought the paramedics in, and they brought him up, and they dusted him down, cleaned him up, sewed him up, and he lived to tell another tale. But it just makes you realize that the caliber of devotees that we have in ISKCON, they've gone through so much, and they've experienced direct darshan of Krishna, and then they're sharing their realizations in their books. So many great souls we have now, and they have so much faith and conviction. So then all we have to do is really hear from those that are already know that Krishna consciousness is not a myth. I mean, you've got two alternatives, right? One is you can believe in something which is not detectable, which is indefinable, which is undecipherable, which is completely inconceivable. You know, if we said that Krishna was just a white ball that had been floating around in space, and it was a white ball of pure consciousness, and it was just kind of floating. It's always been there, just this kind of white ball, you know, nobody knew where it came from, it's always been there. And one day this white ball exploded into cows and trees and grass and dhotis and monks on his feet and playing the flute. And you kind of get your head around that, because you just start off with this white ball. But what's so inconceivable about Krishna is it's everything in one go. He was just always there. The grass was always there. You were always there. The cows were always there. Everything was just always there. It's like, but how can it just have always been there? So that's like a huge leap of faith to believe that. But then the alternative is that there was nothing. So the atheists say, well, I can't believe that. Oh, so where did everything come from? From nowhere, from nothing. Well, the very nature of nothing is it doesn't exist. That's the whole point. Nothing doesn't exist. And then if everything came from nothing, you're asking me to believe that. Well, isn't that a greater leap of faith than believing that everything came from Krishna? I mean, if that's a myth, then isn't this a myth? How can you understand that we're floating around on a lump of earth, spinning around a ball that's on fire, with rivers on it, and trees flying around, flowers making honey, and fingernails growing out the ends of your fingers, and food going in a hole, in a ball on top of your shoulders that turns into blood and mucus? That's a myth. If we lived in a land of nothing, where we were nothing and everybody was nothing, and we said, we want you to believe in this, there's a world where there's balls of mud floating around with a ball of light making things grow in it, you say, no, that's crazy, that's a myth. Our existence is a myth in terms of what is conceivable. So the ultimate inconceivable reality is that Krishna is God, and we're eternally part and parcel of him. And if someone comes up and says, okay, I've got my measuring tape here, put Krishna in front of me, and if I can measure him, then I consider he exists. That's a really poor premise for accepting things. If you can get your tape measure around it, then it exists. How much does an ant know? If you had an ant, right, and you interviewed the ant, how much does it know about what's going on in the temple room, where it crawls around every day looking for breadcrumbs? You say, there's a temple room here, and Vyasa Swami Srila Prabhupada, and oil paintings on the wall, and they'll say, no, it's just a myth. Because it's beyond its ability to accommodate. And then at the same time, Krishna says to show them special mercy, Tesham Evana Kampatam, with the jnana, the deepena of knowledge, the lamp of knowledge, Tesham eva nikampatam aham. Tesham eva nikampatam. Jnana Dipana Bhasvatar. Bhasvatar is glowing, with the shining lamp of knowledge. I destroy the ignorance born, the darkness born of ignorance. So if we do find something seems to be a myth, that conception that it's a myth and it's not real, that's darkness. And Jnana Dipena, Krishna can hold the shining lamp of knowledge, and he can illuminate the dark recesses of the heart that don't believe. Any questions or comments? Yeah.
What we're talking about, the holy name and I was thinking about actually, so when you met these body was chanting on the class, I was thinking was he chanting the holy names before he fell down? And does that mean he was committing on for life after he fell down? And then how was the transition period and chanting God and then back here and there?
So initially, because he knew that it was wrong to do all the things that he did, then if he was chanting, so he discontinued the chanting at that point. And then the Namabhas was that he was indicating Narayan as his child, but he wasn't chanting rounds or anything. And then even when he did see the Vishnu Dutas, they said, okay, now you have to go back and now you have to cultivate Shuddhanam. So he still had a lot of work to do, even though he'd seen the Vishnu Dutas and the Yamadutas, and he was really aware now. Then he had to go back, and I don't know how many more years. He was 88, so he couldn't have lived that much longer. So maybe the next 10 years, he was a really good boy, and he really did his japa seriously, and then he cultivated Shuddhanam and he went back, And initially, there must have been some Namaparad there, otherwise he wouldn't have fallen down. Namabhas would have, because Namabhas, you don't fall. Namabhas is your nishta, you don't fall down then. But there's like an overlapping, so you have Namaparad with some Namabhas and a little bit of Shuddhanam, or you have mainly Namaparad with a bit of Namabhas and practically no Shuddhanam, or you have hardly any Namaparad, many Namabhas, and quite often Shuddhanam. So they all kind of overlap each other as well, because you're transitioning, and sometimes the modes are like this, sometimes they're like that, sometimes your conditioning comes up, sometimes it goes down.
Saying in a lecture that if we connect some offenses, there's no forgiveness for them.
Yeah, the conclusion could be that because I'm doing this in the hope that I can get free from it by chanting, and somebody could say, well, you better to not chant then, your chanting is so offensive. So the most offensive thing you can do is to stop chanting. Even if you are totally offensive, but you're still chanting, then there's a glimmer of hope that at some point it'll start to purify and you'll start to feel remorseful. And then the Holy Name will really start to purify you. But if you stop chanting, you've finished, game over. There's nothing you can do now, you have to wait till your next lifetime. So for however bad you feel you are, and it's interesting that the conclusion of offensive chanting is Trinadapi Sanichena. So a lot of devotees, I think they get to the first Shastakam and everything's Haribol and they're okay with that. Then they get to the second one where they realize, actually, I'm not getting a taste. And then they start realizing, sometimes you can wake up and realize very vividly why you're not getting a taste for the Holy Name. You see how proud you are. You see how stupid you are. You see how dozy you are. All these things make it very apparent. And then you reach a fork in the road, which is that you can continue on humbly or you can discontinue because you can't face that purification. It's just too much for your false ego to see how far you are from the goal. I set all these alarms, and when the alarm goes off, I can't remember what the alarm is for. You can't put names to them, just don't put names to the alarms. And so I think in ISKCON, there's a few challenges actually. One is infiltration from other camps, either Ritvik or Gaudiya, and we've lost a lot of devotees from the two camps actually, because they don't have full faith in Prabhupada in the first place. So that's one challenge. And the other challenge is when the devotee reaches the stage of realizing that the reason why he's not getting a taste is because he's making offenses, that he decides at that point to discontinue the process. And then how long that takes as well, it could be years and years and years, and then suddenly he realizes, now I need to be humble, you know. It's like the person that's humble is the most intelligent person who's realized that he needs to be humble. It's like the crown of all academic pursuits and religious study and scriptural scrutinization is you achieve this jewel of humility, real humility, where you really feel that you are lower than everybody else and that you want to serve everybody else. And when you're on Sankirtan, the pratishta creeps in all the time because you do really well and you start thinking, I did 10,000 yesterday. You know, whatever it is, the pratishta starts to creep in again. And as soon as that happens, you lose that humility that really connects you to people. You know, that you're able to stop somebody, appreciate them, respect them, not judge them, really have a heart-to-heart connection. Maybe the first person that's ever really listened to the person is in his entire life. And the person suddenly starts revealing everything, you know. Oh, this happened to be all the most private things in his life. The super soul just tells him in his heart, you can really trust this person. This person is a really good guy. If you do what he asks, it'll be really beneficial for you. That can only take place when there's genuine humility, you know. You can't stop somebody and say, excuse me, I won the Christmas marathon and I'm considered, you know, my name's Maha Big Buck Das. So what do you think, £100? Take $10? Doesn't work, right? They don't know you from Adam. They just want to know that you're a nice person and that you're humble and that you appreciate them and respect them. That's all they're interested in. And we have to respect everybody, Rupa Goswami says. So if a person's taken up spiritual life, we respect them. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep our distance. And that's the real art. Srila Prabhupada said, the art of Krishna consciousness is cooperation. So how to learn to do that? Because you don't want to become impacted by by offending the person or upsetting the person. So how to navigate through we have just a few devotees in this particular building, but in the society of devotees worldwide, there's so many camps. There's the Kumaris, there's this ones, the that ones, and they all have their own take on things, you know. And some of them will wear the tilak like this, and some of them wear the tilak like that. Some of them have a seeker there, and all kinds of weird and wonderful things, and we're just like, okay, Haribol. Well, we don't want to get too involved or hear their opinions too much. For whatever reason, we've been chosen by Srila Prabhupada to assist him. We should always remember that that's a very special privilege that we've been given, you know. And thanks Srila Prabhupada for choosing us. And if we can stay year after year in this society, then that means for whatever reason, weird and wonderful reason, we must be pleasing Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said that his Guru Maharaj will be more affectionate to you because you're his grand disciples. He said that to his disciples. So in the same way, Srila Prabhupada, because we're disciples of his disciples, then he's more affectionate toward us, you know. Grandfather's more lenient with the grandchildren than his own children. So that means we're in a special place. We're not his direct disciples. We're taking shelter of his disciples. So that's a wonderful opportunity that we have. Pradyumna had a prophetic dream the other day that the place was jam-packed with devotees and he couldn't move for tulsis. They were growing everywhere. Shiva Ramaj as well said that Scotland has so much potential for expansion, but the potential will only be realized when the devotees are fully aligned with Prabhupada, and then he can manifest. Look what Prabhupada did. He was one person. Look what he did. If we can all become like Prabhupada, just think what we can do. ISKCON Govinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Premanandi, Haribo.
Joy.